McDonald's restaurant kitchen service area, DAY 1:47 p.m. The fluorescent lights hum a cheerful yet irritating high-pitched song. The air is thick with the scent of fried potato, stale coffee, and industrial disinfectant. The lunch rush is at its peak. The chaos is a symphony of beeping registers, sizzling grills, and the relentless, mechanical cheer of the drive-thru speaker. Ela já 28 tire, sharp eyes, the acting shift manager, wipes a bead of sweat from his forehead. He usually works nights. The daylight makes the plastic decor look harsh and cheap. He barks an order to a frantic teenage crew member, Timmy, about an incorrectly assembled Big Mac. Outside, the midday sun beats down, casting harsh shadows across the drive-thru lane. Suddenly, the kitchen lights stutter. Not a flicker, but a violent, momentary spasm, like a dying heart. The beeping stops. The deep fryers, usually roaring with heat, fall silent. The atmosphere instantly loses its manufactured warmth, replaced by a profound, unnatural cold that sinks deep into the bones. The sun outside, visible through the main dining windows, doesn't just dim, it vanishes. It is instantaneous, utter, absolute night. The transition is too sudden for a storm or a power outage. The emergency lights fail to activate. Complete, oppressive darkness floods the building, broken only by the sickly, green glow of the main monitor screens at the counter, which begin to display cryptic, distorted symbols resembling ancient runes rather than dollar amounts. A collective, terrified gasp rises from the trapped customers. The only remaining sound is a drive-thru speaker, which previously sounded friendly and automated, now emitting a sustained, high-pitched static that scrapes against Elijah's eardrums like fingernails on a chalkboard. Elijah fumbles for his phone, the screen offering the only meager light. Revealing the horrifying reality, the faces of the customers are etched with pure panic, distorted by the sudden, cold illumination. The automatic glass doors, designed to slide open with a friendly whoosh, or lock solid. He tries to pull them apart, scraping his hands on the metal frame. They feel cold, heavier than steel, as if the very architecture of the restaurant has solidified against them, trapping the 30-odd people inside in a silent, suffocating box of manufactured happiness turned tomb. The smell of frying oil is rapidly replaced by the metallic stench of ozone and something rotten, like meat left out in the desert sun. He screams for Timmy, but the only response is the ceaseless, grating static from the outside world they can no longer reach, and the slow, liquid sound of something dripping behind the ice cream machine. The panic intensifies. A young woman near the soda fountain begins to weep hysterically, her sobs echoing strangely in the dense darkness. Elijah, trying desperately to maintain control, uses his flashlight app to scan the room. The darkness seems to absorb the light, limiting its reach to barely 10 feet. He notices the windows. They are not shattered or obscured. They are simply black, opaque, like panes of obsidian. It's not night outside. The outside world simply does not exist anymore. Everyone, stay calm. Elijah's voice cracks, sounding weak against the monstrous silence. This is a system failure. We need to find the breaker. He pushes past the service counter, the floor beneath his feet now strangely tacky and resilient, like walking on layers of old chewing gum. Keith finds Martha 60 essiers of grease ingrained in her uniform, the oldest employee, standing absolutely still by the coffee station. Her eyes are wide, reflecting the green glow of the registers like twin emeralds. "Elijah," she whispers, her voice brittle. "The doors, they're not locked, dear. They're sealed." She points a trembling hand toward the main entrance. In the faint light, Elijah sees that the gap between the sliding doors is no longer a seam of metal and glass. It is filled with a viscous, black residue that seems to be oozing from the framework itself, hardening into an impenetrable, tar-like barrier. The realization hits him. This isn't a blackout. This is a containment. He turns back to the kitchen, where the fryers still emit a faint, infernal orange heat, the only reliable light source. As he glances at the stainless steel hood above the grill, he sees something reflected that makes his stomach clench. The familiar golden arches sign, normally a beacon of cheap food, is now twisted and elongated outside. The yellow metal appears to be weeping slow, thick rivulets of black fluid, draining down into the pavement where the asphalt seems to shimmer unnaturally. The stench of decay grows stronger, focusing on the area around the forgotten food trays. A child's discarded Happy Meal box begins to vibrate silently on a sticky table. The clown face printed on the side, dissolving into an expression of sheer, agonizing terror. One customer, Mr. Henderson, a middle-aged man who had been calmly waiting for his order, suddenly screams, clutching his head. He points frantically at the silver self-service kiosk screen. It knows what I asked for. It's listing all my regrets. Elijah pushes him down, trying to shield him from the screen, which now flashes erratic sequences of numbers and fragmented personal confessions, visible only for a split second before cycling back to the sickening green void. The cold deepens, demanding tribute from the living warmth in their bodies. Elijah recognizes the futility of remaining in the main dining area, where the spatial distortion seems greatest and the terror is loudest. He hurts the remaining group of about 10 survivors, mostly staff and a few petrified customers, in to the narrow confines of the manager's office. A cramped, windowless room filled with stale paper and the smell of cheap coffee grounds. They barricade the door using file cabinets and a heavy safe. The office, though small, feels marginally safer, cutting them off from the direct influence of the warped exterior, but the darkness permeates everything. They hear it now, too distinct from the static, a low, continuous whispering that seems to emanate from the ventilation system. It isn't a language. It's a collage of sound effects that should be comforting but are profoundly malicious. The high-pitched, manic giggle of a forgotten mascot, a distorted, slowed-down version of the corporate jingle baba dash da dash ba dash ba dash ba dash ba da dot dot. I'm suffering it dot 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 single quotes. And the chilling, automated voice of the order machine repeating fragmented food names. Flesh, McFlurry, dot dot dot. Soul, dot dot. Value, meal. Martha begins praying, clutching a small, tarnished crucifix that she usually hides beneath her uniform. She looks at Elijah, her eyes pleading. The land, Elijah. This location. They built it too fast. Rushed the concrete, didn't heed the warnings. Elijah, practical and cynical, snaps back. What warnings, Martha? Zoning violations, no dear. They dug too deep. There was an old meeting ground here. Not native, not local. Something that was supposed to stay buried beneath the cheap foundations. She explains a local, forgotten legend of a hunger site, a place where offerings were made to ensure the sun would rise, and when the place was paved over for rapid commercial consumption, the offering was interrupted, and now the site demands a new form of sustenance. He tries to dismiss it as old wives' tales, but the whispering in the vents gains volume, sounding like hundreds of famished mouths clicking and sliding. He notices the air conditioning vent grating is vibrating violently in a thin, sickly gray mist. Smelling overpoweringly of burnt sugar and old meat begins to seep into the room. One of the survivors, a teen named Kevin, panics, kicking at the vent cover. The second his shoe makes contact, a burst of heat erupts, instantly charring the sole of his sneaker and leaving a blackened handprint mark across the metal. They retreat further into the corner, illuminated only by the frantic beam of Elijah's flashlight. He realizes the entity isn't just external darkness. It's an internal corruption, using the very structure and purpose of the restaurant mass-produced sustenance and corporate joy as its terrifying template. The forced confinement quickly breaks the last vestiges of civilized behavior. Arguments flare up over the limited battery life of their phones. Elijah knows they can't stay put. The air is getting toxic, and the whispering is evolving into distinct, malicious suggestions aimed at exploiting their deepest fears and hunger. He decides to risk a trip back out to the main kitchen, hoping to find tools, maybe an axe or a sturdy fire extinguisher, and more importantly, to assess the structural integrity of the walk-in freezer door, their last potential escape route. He leaves Chloe, the young woman who had been sobbing earlier, but now shows a terrifying stillness, in charge of maintaining the barricade. Stepping out of the office and into the vast, abyssal kitchen is like entering an alternate dimension. The darkness here is heavier, thicker, punctuated only by the dying orange glow of the abandoned fryers. The grease traps are overflowing with a substance that isn't oil but a black, pulsating sludge. The prepared food on the holding racks has decayed instantly, now coated in thick, white mold that emits a faint, greenish luminescence. The air is cold enough to see his breath. The most grating noise remains the automated drive-through system situated near the exit. It is repeating, slowly and methodically, the same garbled message over and over. Its tone shifting from automated cheer to profound liturgical demand, acceptance, required, for the meal. Please proceed to the first window, acceptance, required, Floor, Elijah creeps along the tiled floor. which is now slippery and dangerously warped. He manages to locate a sturdy, full fire extinguisher near the back service entrance. Clutching it like a desperate weapon, he turns to examine the freezer door. But before he can reach it, a movement catches his eye near the grill. It isn't the fluid darkness moving, it's a specific, distorted figure. It's a man, or what used to be one, still wearing a faded maintenance uniform. His skin is drawn tight and sickly yellow, and his limbs are bent at impossible angles. His torso is merged horrifically with the metal bars of a deep-fry basket, which seems to have fused into his rib cage, leaking black oil and steaming slightly. The entity turns its head, revealing two empty sockets, where eyes should be, and a mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural grin that seems too large for its skull, rimmed with burnt, crispy remnants of flesh. It raises one hand, its fingers elongated and tipped with sharpened bone, clicking against the metal griddle. The shift never ends. The creature hisses, the voice a chorus of distorted cash registers. Elijah doesn't engage. He pivots and sprints, the fire extinguisher heavy in his grip, the sound of his heavy breathing swallowed by the oppressive silence. He glances back and sees the deep-fry entity shuffling, its movements jerky and unnatural, scraping the metal basket along the floor tiles, chasing him with a sickening, sizzling sound. He slams the office door shut, just as the entity reaches the threshold, the metal bars of its cage ribs impacting the outside of the safe with a sickening clang. The entity doesn't try to break through. It merely stands there, scratching rhythmically at the wood and metal, filling the tiny office with a tangible sense of malice. Elijah is visibly shaking, his shirt soaked with cold sweat, the terror now replacing his exhaustion. He explains the entity to the group, emphasizing that it was a warped embodiment of the restaurant itself. It's feeding on the iconography. It's using what we know to break us, he gasps, pushing the fire extinguisher toward Chloe. We need to destroy the source, the registers, the computer systems. I think that's the brain. Martha, however, is strangely calm. She has stopped praying. She's staring intently at the vent where the black mist continues to seep in, a faint smile playing on her lips. It's warm now, Elijah, she murmurs, her eyes glazed over. It promised me Joey said he's waiting. Joey's going to make me a large fries, just the way I like them. Joey was her son, who died 5 years ago. Her betrayal, born not of malice but of ultimate grief and false comfort, sends a fresh wave of horror through the survivors. Before anyone can stop her, Martha pushes away from the barricade, dropping her cross, and throws her body against the door, sliding the bolt aside. The deep-fry entity immediately ceases its scratching. A Samak 100 receipts printing simultaneously echoes through the space. Martha steps out into the darkness, walking directly toward the figure. "Joey, Mommy's here," she calls out sweetly. Elijah watches, horrified, as the deep-fry entity wraps its spindly, oily arms around Martha, not in violence, but in a grotesque embrace. There is no sound of struggle, only a deep, resonating slurp, and then silence. The entity, appearing slightly thicker, turns its empty gaze back towards the office, the promise of easy sustenance now ringing in the suffocating black air. The floor of the office starts to groan under the sheer weight of the surrounding evil. The tile beneath the feet cracks and peels back slowly, revealing a sticky, dark, organic substance underneath that pulsates with a faint, internal crimson light, like a diseased, shallow heart beating beneath the building. Elijah grabs Chloe, yanking her back from the threshold of the door just as the organic floor substance begins to bubble and steam. They know they have seconds. The deep-fry entity is approaching again, its steps now heavy and deliberate, accompanied by a sound like crushing cartilage. They abandon the office, crawling through a low gap in the storage room wall that leads directly into the preparation kitchen, a space cluttered with heavy machinery, bugs of flour, and industrial-sized cans of pickles. The darkness here is slightly less intense, thanks to a few persistent emergency red indicator lights on the walk-in freezer. They need a plan, and fast. The only viable path is through the main service counter area to the front exit, hoping the destruction of the central nervous system of the entity will momentarily break the sealing mechanism. The registers. Elijah yells over the grinding noise of the approaching entity, which is now attempting to tear down the walls separating the office from the storage room. We hit the main server tower. Chloe, pale but focused, grabs a hefty metal mixing bowl, ready to use it as a makeshift shield. They burst into the main service area. The green light of the registers is now intensely bright, pulsating rapidly. The sounds of the restaurant the fryer sizzle, the jingles, the customer chatter are all emanating from this nexus, amplified and hideous. The service counter itself seems to be breathing, the plastic shell distorting and stretching like wet leather. As they advance, a monumental shape begins to coalesce behind the registers. It is the core manifestation of the entity, a colossal humanoid figure, easily 10 feet tall, constructed entirely from the restaurant's refuse and symbolism. Its skeletal frame is made of warped, bleached plastic chairs and piping. Its skin is layers of greasy, compressed paper cups and food wrappers. The McFlurry wrapper eyes stare out, and its body is illuminated from within by the dying, electric glow of the I'm Lovin' It signage flickering spasmodically inside its chest cavity. The smell is overwhelming, the concentrated odor of stale burgers, melted vinyl, and death. It is the embodiment of consumer waste and corporate hunger. The mega-entity raises an arm, a huge, bone-white ladle handle ending in a clump of sharp, frozen metan slams it down, narrowly missing Elijah. He trips, falling near the industrial fryer vat, which is still radiating infernal heat, a beacon of pure, concentrated oil. A terrible idea, born of desperation, and the smell of hot grease ignites in his mind. He yells at Chloe to hold the entity's attention. Chloe, with unexpected bravery, rushes forward and hurls the heavy mixing bowl at the mega-entity's chest. The impact is negligible, but the diversion works. The creature turns its terrifying focus on her, its voice booming a chorus of 1,000 robotic drive-through speakers demanding satisfaction, order, fulfillment. Your waiting time is over. Elijah scrambles to the back of the fryer station. He grabs a massive stainless steel bucket used for draining oil. It's heavy, agonizingly hot, and filled with highly viscous, scalding used cooking grease. He hoists a bucket with a desperate grunt, the heat searing his gloves, and charges toward the entity. With a primal roar, he swings the bucket, splashing the entirety of the scalding, semi-solidified fat directly onto the towering frame of the McDonald's. The effect is immediate and devastating. The entity, composed primarily of paper, plastic, and processed meat, reacts as if doused in acid. It screams a high-frequency shriek. That sounds exactly like the corporate jingle played backward at 78 as the saturated oil melts and dissolves its composite body. The green light of the central register system sputters violently. The entity rides, its massive form dissolving into black, oily smoke and rapidly decomposing grease. The darkness, which had been pressing on them like physical weight, suddenly recoils, pulling back from the service area like an exhaling breath. The windows immediately snap back to visibility. The bright, blinding daylight floods the McDonald's interior. The oppressive cold vanishes, replaced by the mundane warmth of a summer afternoon. The doors slide open. Elijah, panting, covered head to toe in black suit and oil, grabs Chloe. They stumble out of the restaurant, passing the cash registers, which are now beeping merrily, displaying the normal menu and prices. The entire dining area is pristine. No broken glass, no tar, no visible distortion. It's exactly 2:05 p.m. Only 18 minutes have passed. They look around the parking lot. Cars are moving. People are milling about, oblivious. The golden arches are cheerful, golden yellow. It's as if the 19 minutes of pure, consuming horror never happened. They look back at the McDonald's, a clean, familiar beacon of quick service. They are the only ones covered in black sludge and smelling of burnt, rotten sugar. They are marked. Elijah realizes the true horror. The entity wasn't killed. It was merely forced to retreat, cleaned up by the efficiency of the corporate machine, hidden again in the unseen corners of the mundane. He looks down at a stray napkin fluttering in the breeze. A tiny, almost imperceptible whisper drifts up from the paper, chilling him to the core. We're always open. They look at each other, knowing they carry the infection of the night that vanished, forever bound to the secret darkness lurking beneath the facade of cheerful consumerism. The McDonald's beckons, waiting for the next shift, waiting for the next meal. The fluorescent lights of the Arden Heights McDonald's hummed with a sick yellow energy, bathing the empty dining room in a sterile glow that did little to ward off the encroaching darkness of the late hour. It was 3:17 am and Elias, Bainta pale and weary, leaned against the drive-through window, sipping lukewarm coffee that tasted suspiciously of burnt plastic. He hated the graveyard shift. The air was thick with the smell of stale fryer oil and cheap disinfectant, a stench that clung to his skin like a second uniform. This particular McDonald's, miles off the main interstate and nestled beside a derelict gas station, was known among the regional staff as the Mausoleum, no customers, just eternal maintenance. Ilyas had taken the job out of desperation, a college dropout needing quick rent money. But the stillness of these late hours was starting to fray his sanity. Tonight, however, the stillness felt different. It was too clean. Elias remembered vividly leaving a trail of sugar packets near the condiment station after a particularly clumsy moment an hour ago. Now they were gone. Not just swept up, but stacked with military precision in their plastic holder. Key walked back, dragging his heavy, grease-coated shoes. The stainless steel counter gleamed unnaturally. He wiped his finger across it, expecting the usual sticky residue. Nothing. It was mere... Lester must have been here earlier, Elias mumbled to himself, though he knew Lester, the manager, hadn't set foot in the store since 8 p.m. Lester was famously lazy. A sudden, sharp clang resonated from the empty kitchen. The sound of a metal basket hitting the floor too loud, too precise for a random settling noise. Elias froze, heart hammering against his ribs. He crept toward the double swing doors leading to the fry station. The kitchen was empty, the fryer oil perfectly still beneath the infrared warmers. Yet, hanging in the air, a faint, almost imperceptible smell of bleach mixed with ozone and something ancient. Something that felt like dried blood and institutional despair. He checked the fry station. The entire area, usually crusted with dazzled salt and residual potato starch, was immaculate. The floor drains, notorious repositories of sludge, were shining. Elias felt a cold dread settle in his stomach, far colder than the refrigerated storage unit. Someone or something was working faster, cleaner, and more efficiently than any human being should. He looked up at the clock. 3:20 a.m. The time seemed to jump, skipping directly to 3:21 a.m. without the intervening second-hand sweep. A small shiver, the touch of an icy finger on the back of his neck, made him whirl around, but there was only the mocking yellow light and the eternal, terrifying silence of the perfect, empty restaurant. The efficiency continued throughout the night, morphing from unsettling coincidence into palpable terror. Elias was supposed to be stocking the freezer shelves, a tedious, hour-long chore involving shifting heavy boxers of frozen chicken nuggets and fish fillets. He had left the work half-finished to check the restroom supplies. When he returned, the freezer door was open, the fluorescent bulb casting an ethereal fog over the contents. Every shelf was perfectly organized, the boxers labeled and rotated by expiry date, a task that would have taken him another 40 minutes minimum. He felt a rising panic, a claustrophobic fear that the very structure of the building was shifting around him, responding to some unseen will. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe a regional cleanliness inspector had dropped by unannounced, but the main door was locked and bolted. He checked the time again, 3:45 a.m. He had done nothing for the last 15 minutes except wander in fear. Yet somehow, the workload was decreasing exponentially. That's when he started hearing the sounds, faint at first, like the whisper of steel wool against porcelain, followed by the rapid, rhythmic clack, clack, clack of the sandwich press being operated at inhuman speed. Elias crept toward the grill station, pressing his ear against the cold metal door. The clacking stopped instantly. Silence. He pushed through the door. The grill was off, cooling down, yet the metallic sheen on its surface was breathtaking. It had been scrubbed down, degreased, and polished so thoroughly that the reflection of his terrified face wavered in the black metal. On the counter, beneath the heat lamp, a single, perfectly assembled cheeseburger sat steaming. It was wrapped meticulously, the paper folded into sharp, impossible creases displaying an obsessive level of detail, and it was still hot. Who made this? Why? Elias's breath hitched in his throat. He reached out a trembling hand, peeling back the paper. The patty, the cheese, the pickle, everything was placed with surgical precision. This wasn't standard fast food assembly. This was an act of devotion. He lifted the burger. Underneath, pressed into the paper, was a message written in condensation or grease. Perfectly legible. Time wasters will be fired. Efficiency is law. Elias dropped the burger with a choked cry. He scrambled backward, slipping on the suddenly immaculate tile floor, hitting the metal storage rack. He needed to leave immediately. He didn't care about the job. He cared about survival. He ran toward the back exit, the one leading to the trash compactor, and the lonely parking lot. His fingers fumbled with the deadbolt. It wouldn't turn. It felt fused, locked by an internal, spectral force he trapped. The realization hit Elias with the weight of a commercial deep fryer. The back door, usually unreliable and prone to jamming, was sealed tight, the metal cold and unyielding. The front door was triple locked by the electric system, only accessible by manager code or the morning shift arrival. Marvin Elias decided the unseen entity had to have a name had locked him in. He sank to the floor, leaning against the cold cinder block wall, trying to control his frantic breathing. The only light came from the perpetual hum of the kitchen equipment and the sickly yellow dining room. He He needed context, something to explain the impossible perfection and the chilling menace. His gaze fell upon a dusty, long-forgotten employee locker tucked away behind a stack of paper cups, seemingly untouched for decades. Curiosity overcoming paralyzing fear, Elias used a heavy serving spoon to pry the rusty locker door open. Inside, amid ancient dust and the skeletal remains of a petrified mouse, he found a bundle of faded paperwork and an old, cracked name tag. The tag, brittle plastic, was engraved with the name Marvin. The paper was an old disciplinary report dated 1986. Marvin, the report detailed, was cited repeatedly for excessive zeal and hostile enforcement of cleanliness standards against co-workers. The final report entry, horrifyingly, was a police incident report marked accidental fatality. Marvin had died during the graveyard shift. The report was disturbingly vague but mentioned a failure in the industrial frying basket winch system, suggesting that Marvin, during an overly zealous cleaning attempt, had been crushed or dragged into the scalding oil. The final line of the report chilled Elias to the bone. Subject Marvin D. showed extreme dedication to corporate efficiency until the moment of incident. Elias slammed the locker door shut, dropping the name tag. Marvin wasn't just a ghost. He was the literal manifestation of fast food corporate obsession, a demonic manager eternally bound to the greasy altar of efficiency. The subtle sounds returned, louder now, the rhythmic scrubbing from the far corner of the storage room, like sandpaper on bone. Elias knew Marvin was angry. His research was a distraction, a waste of precious, quantifiable time. A terrifying, high-pitched whine started emanating from the ventilation system, a sound like tortured metal. Then, a voice, a dry, raspy whisper that seemed to vibrate directly inside Elias's skull, spoke not through the air, but through the very structure of the building. You have 20 seconds to return to Station 7. Station 7 requires dusting. Elias looked at the clock. 4 y 1. He realized with absolute horror that Marvin was maintaining a perfect, continuous work schedule, and Elias was now the unwilling, mandatory second man on his spectral shift. Elias scrambled to his feet, driven by the sheer terror in Marvin's voice, a voice stripped of humanity, replaced by the hollow echo of a tyrannical performance review. Station 7 was the soda fountain, notoriously sticky and prone to attracting fruit flies. He raced over, grabbing a rag and spray bottle, his hands shaking so badly he could barely aim the nozzle. He wiped the stainless steel drip tray, but the moment he finished, the rasping voice returned, closer this time, seemingly right behind the ice machine. Inefficient application. You failed to use the hyaline cleanser first. Penalty! 10 seconds added to total shift duration. Elias gasped and spun around. Nothing. But the air around the ice dispenser was now freezing, crystallizing moisture instantly. He could see his own terrified breath plume out. The cleaning supplies rack rattled violently, and a bottle of industrial degreaser flew off the shelf, narrowly missing his head before shattering against the wall, the potent chemicals filling the air with a choking vapor. Elias recognized the warning. Marvin wasn't just observing, he was actively managing the environment, correcting perceived performance failures with physical force. Elias dropped to his knees, frantically searching for the hyaline cleanser, desperation turning into a primal survival instinct. He cleaned the fountain again, following imaginary, decades-old procedures, scrubbing until his fingers were raw. He finished, praying for silence. Instead, Marvin issued the next command: grill inspection required. The residue score is 1.1 parts per million above acceptable parameters. Failure to correct results in formal written warning. Elias dragged himself to the grill, staring at the black, polished surface. It was spotless, absolutely flawless. Marvin was demanding the impossible, inventing metrics of cleanliness beyond the capability of human perception. Or perhaps only Marvin's ghost eyes could see the microscopic imperfections. Elias grabbed the heavy brick and grill screen, pouring a capful of scorching oil onto the surface to begin the aggressive cleaning process. As he scrubbed the already clean surface, the grill suddenly came alive. The electric coils beneath the metal plate ignited spontaneously, glowing bright orange, radiating an infernal heat. Elias recoiled, shielding his face, but Marvin's presence surged. A shadow coalesced momentarily in the reflection of the highly polished steel gaunt. Gray figure in a faded red and yellow uniform, his face contorted in a silent scream of efficiency. His eyes, devoid of pupils, glowed with the cold, calculating focus of a time-motion study. Marvin's spectral hand, large and skeletal, reached out, gripping Elias's wrists with impossible strength. The cold radiating from the grasp was agonizing, searing through his skin like liquid nitrogen. Slacker, did you clock your downtime? Every second unaccounted for is a direct loss to corporate synergy. The internal voice screamed, resonating with unbearable pain in Ilias's temples. He ripped his arm free, stumbling back, clutching his wrist, which was already showing a line of frostbite across the skin. The ghost employee vanished as quickly as he appeared, leaving only the deafening sizzle of the impossibly hot grill and the crushing weight of mandatory, eternal work. Elias knew then that the only way to survive the shift was to follow Marvin's commands, but that was a road to certain insanity and possibly a gruesome, work-related death. He had to escape, but the spectral manager had the building locked down. Elias glanced toward the kitchen phone, an ancient wall-mounted device usually used for vendor orders. He sprinted toward it, grabbing the receiver, his hands slick with sweat and grease. He slammed the buttons, trying to dial 911. The line was dead. A dry, humorless chuckle echoed softly from the speaker of the phone itself. Unauthorized communication results in immediate suspension, Marvin whispered through the wire, the sound laced with static and the grinding noise of machinery. The internal lights in the kitchen began to strobe, flickering with manic intensity, casting Elias's shadow across the walls like a twitching monster. Elias threw the phone down, realizing that ghosts controlled every electrical node in the building. He retreated into the safety of the walk-in refrigerator, hoping the cold metal walls and low temperature would somehow disrupt the spectral energy. The moment he pulled the heavy magnetic door shut, the temperature dropped instantly, not to the typical 38 degrees Fahrenheit, but plunging into the negatives, the air turning into sharp shards of ice that lacerated his lungs. Frost immediately began coating the interior walls and boxers of meat. Marvin's voice, amplified and terrifyingly clear, boomed around the confined space. The storage unit is not a sanctioned break area. Back to work, employee 407. Your inventory speed is 14% below target. Elias frantically grabbed a box of frozen fries, his fingers sticking to the cardboard. He had to inventory the entire box 12 bags, checking batch numbers, and wait in under 30 seconds. He ripped the box open, fumbling with the heavy bags. He was too slow? The internal light above the shelves suddenly exploded, showering Elias in hot glass shards and leaving him in absolute darkness. The only illumination coming from the slivers of light around the door sill. Panic seized him. He fumbled toward the exit, pushing the heavy door open, gasping for the relatively warmer air of the main kitchen. As he stumbled out, he saw the ultimate chilling proof of Marvin's authority. A long, thin streak of dark, viscous, liquid fresh blood leading from the fryer station back toward the office area. It wasn't human blood. It smelled metallic and synthetic, like corporate fluids. Marvin was setting a trap, forcing Elias to clean the impossible mess. If he failed to clean the hazard, he'd be fired. If he spent too long cleaning it, he'd violate the work schedule. Elias stared at the dark stain, his mind racing through the impossible paradox Marvin had set. He couldn't clean it fast enough, and he couldn't leave it. Marvin was playing a sick game, using the rules of efficiency to torture his living victim. Elias realized he couldn't fight Marvin's obsession. He had to destroy the source of the obsession itself, the ordering system, the physical mechanism that quantified all the terrible metrics Marvin used to maintain control. The main computer terminal, a bulky beige machine containing all the night audit records and inventory data, was located in the manager's tiny, cramped office. Elias sprinted through the kitchen, dodging a barrage of flying ketchup packets and cutlery that Marvin hurled at him, accompanied by shrill, internalized screams of "Stop the clock! Stop the clock!" He burst into the office, the smell of stale coffee and desperation overwhelming him. The computer screen was glowing an eerie green, displaying a relentless cascade of numbers, sales data, waste reports, and, most terrifyingly, a live countdown of Elias's remaining shift time, which was currently paused, marked with the glaring red status, disciplinary hold. Elias slammed his fist onto the power button. Nothing. The machine was running on a ghostly backup system. He searched frantically for the main circuit breaker. It was located outside the office, near the back storage area. Marvin wouldn't let him get there easily. As Elias had exited the office, the kitchen went completely dark, plunging him into absolute blackness. The only illumination came from the emergency exit signs and the terrifying, flickering light of the deep fryers, which had started to boil violently again, spitting jets of scalding oil into the air. Elias heard Marvin moving now, not whispering, a shuffling wet, dragging sound like soaked rubber soles on tile. The sound was coming from the direction of the friars, the place of Marvin S.E. terrible demise. Elias grabbed the nearest weapon, a heavy metal spatula, the kind used for scraping the grill. He crept toward the back, relying on the memory of the floor plan. Suddenly, a cold weight slammed into his back, knocking the wind out of him. He fell, scraping his cheek on the greasy floor. He could feel Marvin's spectral mass pressing him down. A crushing weight that smelled of ammonia and decades-old fryer residue. You have caused an unauthorized work stoppage. This is a Code 7 violation. Marvin's voice was deafening now, right next to his ear, wet and crackling. Elias twisted, swinging the spatula wildly, hitting only air, but the act of defiance briefly dissipated the spectral pressure. He scrambled toward the circuit breaker box, desperately fumbling for the main switch, hearing the sound of the ghost employee closing in, the shuffling turning into a frantic, purposeful limp. Elias reached the cold, metallic circuit panel. His fingers located the thick main breaker switch, labeled primary power. He yanked it down with all his remaining strength. The immediate darkness was profound and absolute, lasting only half a second before the emergency lighting system, powered by its own ops, kicked in. The noise stopped. The sizzling oil subsided. A momentary, beautiful silence filled the air, free of Marvin's suffocating presence. Elias leaned against the wall, chest heaving, believing he had finally broken the cycle. But then, the emergency lights began to pulse slowly, rhythmically, mimicking a steady heartbeat. And the voice returned, softer, almost soothing, yet infinitely more terrifying. Inefficient solution. Employee 407, you merely delayed the maintenance cycle. The system is still running, and now you are late for mandatory uniform exchange. The door to the staff changing room, which Elias knew was locked by a rusty padlock, suddenly flew open, revealing a blindingly white light within. Elias was too exhausted, too defeated, to run. Marvin materialized fully in the doorway, no longer a gray shadow, but a composite of blood-stained polyester and spectral condensation. Marvin was holding a uniform spotless, perfectly pressed, and sized exactly for Elias. It had a name tag affixed Elias, but the uniform was decades old. The exact style Marvin wore in 1986. You have failed the performance review, Elias, but your commitment to the graveyard shift is commendable. You are officially promoted to permanent night auditor. You belong to the store now. We must ensure optimal operating conditions before the morning shift arrives. Failure is not an option in the pursuit of corporate efficiency. Marvin advanced slowly, the faded uniform rustling with the sound of dry leaves. Elias backed away, finding himself cornered against the deep fryer unit, the exact location of Marvin's own fatal accident. Marvin gripped Elias's shoulder, the cold penetrating deep into his bone marrow. Elias tried to scream, but the air caught in his throat, replaced by the faint, inescapable smell of bleach and ozone. He felt the scratchy polyester uniform being forced over his head, the heavy fabric instantly cold and suffocating. The terror peaked as Marvin, satisfied, looked at him with those vacant, managerial eyes and delivered the final, crushing command. Now, Elias, wipe down the fry basket. And remember your FIFO procedures for the frozen patties. We have forever to reach perfection. Elias felt his own consciousness recede, replaced by a cold, surgical focus. His fear vanished, replaced by an obsessive, meticulous desire for order. He automatically picked up the scrubbing brush. The fluorescent lights hummed back to life, steady and sick yellow. Dawn breaks outside. Lester, the living manager, unlocks the front door, yawning deeply. He finds the restaurant impossibly clean, every station gleaming. Elias, you maniac, did you clean the whole place? Lester calls out. In the dimly lit kitchen, a young man, dressed in a strangely old-fashioned uniform, stands silently at the grill, scrubbing a surface already polished to a mirror shine with inhuman, tireless speed. His movements are robotic, his eyes hollow. It is Elias. He doesn't look up, doesn't answer. He just scrapes, scrubs, and polishes, pursuing the perfect, eternal corporate standard. The sound of steel wool on metal echoes relentlessly in the immaculate, haunted silence. Golden arches, McDonald's, storage corridor, Trezeum. The air is thick, stale, and saturated with the cloying odor of old fry oil and industrial cleaning solution. The fluorescent lights hum, a strained, sickly yellow note. Leon 23 Gaunt, perpetually tired, drags a mop bucket across the sticky, white-tiled floor. He is on the skeleton crew, the maintenance shift that polices the quiet, greasy purgatory between closing and the morning rush. Liam approaches the storage corridor, a narrow, perpetually cold passage passage leading to the walk-in freezer. This is the spot where 15 years ago, Lucy, a former manager, now legend, was found. The official story was a tragic, unexplained cardiovascular event. The employee folklore, however, spoke of something far worse. A slow, suffocating death fueled by exhaustion and corporate neglect. A death so profound it twisted her soul into a resident malignancy. Liam pauses. He notices a patch of condensation on the wall, even though the surrounding air is warm. He wipes it with his sleeve. It instantly reforms, just the building breathing, right? He mutters, pulling his collar higher. He checks the service window leading to the drive-thru. The screen is off, but a low, faint, mechanical whisper seems to emanate from the speaker box, not words, but a sound like static trying to form a vowel. He shakes his head, attributing it to fatigue. He remembers the specific detail. The older employees always shared, Lucy didn't just die. They said her last moments were spent desperately trying to claw her way out from behind the deep fryers, leaving 10 dark, permanent grooves in the stainless steel that no amount of scrubbing could ever truly remove. The cold spot in the corridor intensifies, chilling Liam to the bone. Despite the heavy heat radiating from the nearby ventilation shaft, he feels a sudden, sharp pressure against his lower back, like a hand pushing him slightly forward. He stumbles, slamming his knee against the mop bucket. He whirls around, nothing. Just the endless rows of ketchup packets and napkins in the storage shelves. But the whispering from the drive-thru is louder now, closer, almost resembling a distorted, choked-out laughter, sounding less like static and more like a woman gargling thick oil. Kitchen area. Later, Liam is meticulously scrubbing the stainless steel counters, the grease refusing to lift easily. Marco Vinci Essie, nervous, perpetually looking over his shoulder. The other night shift worker is struggling with the shake machine. Marco jumps violently as the ice dispenser suddenly begins churning out ice with furious, uncontrolled energy, spilling cubes across the floor. Marco shouts, "Dude, this place is actively trying to kill us tonight." Liam watches the relentless cascade of ice. He knows the machine is old, but this is unnatural. Hugh walks over, pulls the main power switch, and the churning stops with a sickening grind, followed by a metallic ping from inside the machine's chassis. "Just needs new parts, Marco. Everything here needs new parts." Marco nods, but his eyes are wide. "It's Lucy, man. She hates the maintenance crew the most. They say she died because they overworked her, forced her to clean up a catastrophic grease spill alone at 4 a.m. after a busy shift. She collapsed right there, by the fryer drain." Marco points to a dark, almost black spot on the floor, tiles near the main drain. It's subtle, but undeniably a discoloration that resists bleach and acid alike. Liam stares at the spot. It looks less like a stain and more like a shadow permanently embedded in the ceramic. As they clean the adjacent prep station, a large, heavy steel spatula hanging from a rack suddenly swings, violently scraping the wall next to Liam's head, missing him by inches. The sound is deafening. Marco screams and bolts towards the staff room. Liam's heart hammers. He looks at the swinging spatula. There is no breeze, no vibration in the floor. The spatula comes to a dead stop, then slowly, deliberately, swings back out. Just one smar hanging in the air for a moment before settling. He realizes the air in this specific spot smells different, not just grease, but something metallic and faintly sweet, like old, drying blood mixed with vanilla shake syrup. He grips his scrubbing brush, the mundane tool feeling desperately useless against an invisible, malicious force that treats gravity and mechanics as suggestions. Utility closet and rear hallway dawn approaching. Liam, reluctantly, follows a maintenance directive to clear a chronic blockage in the utility hallway drain, a place notorious for being untouched for years. The hole is even narrower than the storage corridor, lined with rust-pitted chemical drums and stacks of soggy cardboard boxers. The atmosphere here is stifling, humid, and infused with the harsh chemical odor of concentrated fluoride. Liam pries open the heavy metal drain cover. The drain pipe below is clogged not just with solidified grease, but with something fibrous and dark. As he scrapes away the obstruction with a stiff wire, he pulls out a handful of what looks like matted hair, old rubber bands, and shockingly, a fragmented piece of plastic. He washes the plastic piece under the utility sink SE weak stream. It's a fragment of a standard issue McDonald's manager name tag, the edge melted and warped, but the name Lucy is still faintly visible, etched in faded black ink. A profound sense of dread settles over him, heavier than the humidity. This is not just a legend. This is forensic horror. The discovery is immediate, followed by escalation. The single, bare bulb overhead shatters violently, plunging the narrow hallway into absolute darkness. Liam fumbles for his phone light. Before he can activate it, a powerful, unseen force shoves the heavy metal drain cover back down onto the floor, narrowly missing his fingers. The clang echoes. The darkness is absolute, heavy and breathing. He hears a slow, dragging sound approaching him, a wet scrape of something heavy moving across the tiles. Liam freezes, his phone, flashlight finally cutting through the gloom, focusing a shaky beam down the corridor. He sees nothing, but the wall beside him is shimmering, the cheap vinyl wallpaper bubbling and peeling as if exposed to intense heat. Then, smeared across the back of a chemical drum, written in what looks like dried cooking oil, is a single word, crudely etched. Still, the air temperature drops instantly, the sudden chill so severe it burns his lungs. He feels a spectral, skeletal touch brush the back of his neck, accompanied by a sound like dry, cracked lips whispering directly into his ear, "You missed a spot." Staff room, 4:30 a.m. Liam is hunched over his battered laptop, the staff room's cheap laminate table reflecting the blue light of the screen. He searched for archival articles. He finds a local news report from 15 years ago. Tragic incident at local fast food chain. Employee death ruled accident. But digging deeper, accessing a long-dormant online forum for former employees, the truth bleeds through. Lucy hadn't just collapsed. She was crushed. The report detailed how a severe malfunction in the industrial grease filtration system caused a catastrophic backflow of scalding oil and chemical cleaner. Lucy, working alone, had been trapped in the utility corridor, trying to manually clear the blockage. She died slowly, scalded, and suffocated by the very byproduct of the food she served. The detail that curdles Liam's stomach. Witnesses mentioned that the pressure of the backflow had been so intense that the oil had actually forced its way into the ventilation system and through the kitchen tiling, leaving the store permanently permeated by a rancid, burnt odor that no amount of cleaning could eradicate. He realizes the constant, faint smell of sulfur and stale fat as Lucy's essence, the residue of her final, excruciating moments fused with the architecture. He closes the laptop, the screen reflecting his terrified face back at him. He walks back to the kitchen. The kitchen is dead silent, but the ambient noise is wrong. The continuous low-frequency hum of the massive industrial vent fans is absent. Silence is worse. He passes the soda fountain. A single droplet of bright red liquid syrup, but looking vividly like blood, slowly trails down the white plastic casing. As he steps over the threshold into the main dining area, he sees the life-size plastic mascot statue, a cheerful, grinning figure standing in the center aisle. Its plastic eyes are black, empty, and fixed directly on him. Liam knows that statue was stored in the rear office, completely out of sight. The entity is playing with him, testing the boundaries of his sanity, using the corporate cheeriness as a canvas for its decay. The fluorescent lights overhead begin to flicker wildly, faster and faster, creating a strobe effect that turns the dining room into a chaotic, terrifying dance floor of shadows, while a sound like heavy, ragged breathing echoes from the storage corridor. McDonald's, closing shift night. The store is officially closing for emergency deep cleaning and repairs tomorrow. Leon is alone, volunteered or perhaps forced to complete the final inventory count. The atmosphere is oppressive. The air conditioning unit seems to be pumping cold air, but it feels wet and heavy, like standing in a morgue steam room. Liam tries to focus on counting boxers of frozen patties, but every noise is magnified. The distant, heavy clunk of the freezer door closing, even though he knows he didn't touch it. A high-pitched feminine giggle coming from the empty ball pit in the forgotten play area. He knows he has to leave, but a terrifying compulsion, a chilling apathy that Lucy has inflicted keeps him rooted. He glances towards the front counter. The cash register display suddenly springs to life, displaying a total order amount, $66.60. Liam stares, sweat pooling in his palms. He takes a shaky step back, knocking a crate of buns over. The register beeping accelerates, becoming a frantic, rhythmic pulse, like a machine heart failing rapidly. He races to the back door, desperate for escape. The heavy steel fire exit door is sealed shut, the emergency bar jammed with what looks like solidified cooking fat. He frantically tries to yank the bar, his muscles screaming. A cold, oily slick runs down the inside of the door, and a distorted reflection begins to form in the stainless steel, a face stretched wide, skin peeling, eyes hollowed out, framed by matted, grease-soaked hair. The entity, Lucy, is pressing herself against the other side. A deep, guttural moan vibrates through the metal door, followed by a whispered demand that is painfully clear. Serve me. Liam realizes the entity doesn't just want him dead. She wants him consumed by the same cyclical, sterile horror that killed her. He knows he must face the kitchen, the heart of her trauma and power if he has any hope of survival or understanding. Kitchen menus climax. Liam retreats into the kitchen. The grease-trap floor tiles slick and treacherous. The entire environment is hostile now. The fryers, supposedly off, begin to hiss and bubble violently. The oil reaching superheated temperatures, radiating an almost unbearable heat that assaults Liam's skin. The air fills with the smell of burning flesh and old condiments. The industrial exhaust fan above the grills starts spinning in reverse, sucking the rancid air back into the room. Then she manifests fully, not a translucent ghost, but a hideous, corporeal abomination of commercial tragedy. Lucy stands near the main grill, dripping black, viscous fluid, a mixture of ancient oil and decay. Her manager uniform is torn and fused to her skin. Her hands are blackened and claw-like, and her movements are jerky, mechanical, like a malfunctioning animatronic. Her eyes are pure white, reflecting the harsh fluorescent light like polished plastic. She raises a hand, and the heavy metal hood above the grill slams down, nearly flattening the workstation. "You clean this mess?" Lucy rasps, her voice a chorus of frying oil and metallic scraping. Liam grabs the nearest weapon, a large, heavy metal whisk. He swings wildly, striking her arm. The whisk passes through the oily material of her body with a horrible squelch, but the impact only enrages her. Lucy lets out a shriek that sounds like 1,000 squeaky toys being compressed. She lurches forward, grabbing a nearby stainless steel basket used for frying fries. It's glowing red hot from proximity to the active fryers. She throws it at Liam. He dodges, the searing metal scoring the wall behind him. He realizes she is bound to the tools of her trade, channeling her agony through the very apparatus of fast food. He races towards the walk-in freezer door, his only escape into the relative cold, hoping to disrupt her thermodynamic connection to the kitchen heat. But as he reaches the door handle, he looks into the reflection of the polished steel. Lucy is right behind him, her face inches from his, the awful smell of burnt sucrose and death overwhelming his senses. "You belong to the shift," she whispers, and her clawed hand grips his shoulder, the contact burning deep through his thin shirt. Walk-in freezer moments later, the sudden, intense cold of the freezer should offer respite, but it feels like a continuation of the oppression. Liam is slammed against a shelf of frozen chicken nuggets. Lucy is here to the extreme cold, having no diminishing effect on her oily form. If anything, the cold seems to make her movements slower, more deliberate, and therefore more terrifying. Her grip on his shoulder is agonizing, the oil soaking into his skin. "The order must be filled," she drones, her voice losing its rasp, becoming a monotone, synthesized drone, mimicking the drive-through speaker. She forces his face against the ice-covered interior wall. He sees the residual grease clinging to her fingers, now hardening in the sub-zero temperature, forming sharp black talons. Liam struggles, his strength fading. He knows he can't defeat her physically. He has to break the ritual, the cycle of the corporation that binds her. Desperate, he notices a small, old photograph wedged between two freezer boxes, a faded picture of a younger Lucy, smiling, holding a Manager of the Month plaque. In a final burst of adrenaline, Liam rips the photo free and shoves it directly into Lucy's face. The instant the image touches her spectral skin, the entire freezer unit flashes with blinding white light. Lucy recoils, letting out a final, soul-wrenching cry that is pure human anguish, untainted by the demonic static. The lights stabilize. The cold remains, but the oppressive presence is gone. Liam collapses, shivering violently. Ixed golden arches, McDonald's day. The next morning, the store is open, bustling with early customers. The emergency repairs sign is down. Liam stands behind the counter, perfectly clean, his hair neatly combed. He greets customers with a blank, corporate smile. A coworker comments on how much better he looks, less stressed. Liam nods, his eyes unnervingly vacant. He runs a spotless cloth over the register. His hands are pale, his movements stiff. He looks down at his name tag. It is new, shiny, black ink on white plastic, LIAM Shift Manager. As he bags an order, he notices a tiny, almost invisible black stain beneath the fingernail of his right index finger, a residue of burnt grease that refuses to wash away. He doesn't scrub it. He touches the cold, clean, stainless steel counter and a low, almost imperceptible hum starts up from within the structure of the kitchen. He leans in close to the drive-through speaker, though no one is ordering, and whispers, his voice low and monotone. Welcome to your shift. You missed a spot. The order must be filled forever.